Good evening, brothers and sisters, lovers, haters, boys and girls. I just thought I'd jump on tonight and I would talk a little bit about the greatest man I ever knew, my granddad. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about his generation and his big brother, my great uncle Howard, who was taken at the fall of Singapore by the Japanese. It's because I'm reading that book upstairs about Horace Greeley, Do the Birds Still Sing in Hell? And it's really got me thinking about my granddad last night and today in particular. I miss him and I think about him every day, but that book's really triggered a lot of memories because Horace was the same generation. And it's a brilliant read. I'm about 3 chapters in. But I thought I'd make this tonight about as a tribute really to my granddad. Like I say, the greatest man I ever knew, a paragon of virtue. And I think what's important to recognise is people of that generation and the values that they had, the moral values, the level of commitment, the character, the toughness that those people had is extinct. Those values and, those type of people will never ever be born again. Not in today's society, the way society is nowadays. They'll never ever be born again. They're extinct. Everything that they stood for is extinct. And it's a shame because, kids today, they're the way they are, and the world's got a lot to answer for. But my granddad was born in 1932. He's the middle brother of 3. When they were all young, just up at Brough Estuary there, up at the Solway, none of them could swim, and they were always told to keep away from the water, and they went up, and the youngest brother, John, slipped down the bank, down the estuary, and he went in the Solway, and he drowned. He drowned right in front of me granddad and my great uncle Howard. They couldn't go in and get him because, they couldn't swim, and the body was never ever recovered, and I often wonder what type of trauma and effect that would have had on them, the other 2 brothers, just watching the brother just die like that. My granddad told us about it a couple of times. You could see the sadness in his face when he used to talk about it, like reliving it, and I often wonder what effect that would have had on him as a person. Not nice, tragic, a tragedy really. Another great uncle that I've never got to never got to live his life. But yeah, my great uncle Howard was called National Service. I think 40. I think he was 40. He was in the war for years, and he was away over the Far East in Singapore. And my great uncle Howard got taken at the fall of Singapore. He was in the artillery. He got taken at the fall of Singapore by the Japanese, and he got put on the Burma Railroad, the Burma to Thailand Railroad. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the bridge over the River Kwai, but my great uncle Howard was on that railway. He was a POW. The railway was deemed impossible to build. It was right through the jungle, and it was going from Burma to Thailand over rivers and jungles. And like I said, it was deemed impossible to build, but the Japanese, they constructed it, and they used POWs, to work as slaves, really. My great uncle Howard was a POW for over 4 years. The war was well over before he came back. And when he came back, he was blind, and he was in a wheelchair for the rest of his life through malnutrition, and so many beatings. He had a lot of scars on his head. He was hit with a rifle butt, many times. Yeah, I remember him from when I was young. He was a lovely man in a wheelchair, obviously blind, and he loved us. He loved me he was a really nice man. My granddad was called up to the Korean War. My granddad was too young for active service in the Second World War. He was called, my granddad, a national service. I mean, national service, that thing's gone, I don't think it'd be a bad thing to bring national service back, But my granddad went into the Korean War when he was 17 years old, on an 8-week voyage. 6-week voyage, I think it was, but they never got to where they were. It took them 8 weeks to get to where they were stationed. Told us a few stories, you know. As a kid, I used to often ask him if he, you know, if he'd killed anyone at war, and all he ever said was he fired his rifle 4 times in combat. You know, he was attached to a regiment called the Inniskilling Dragoon Guards, and him and his regiment were part of a massive offensive that they fought the North Koreans back over the Imjin River to Pyongyang. The North Koreans and the Chinese that were backed by the Russians, you know, and they fought them all the way over the Imjin River back to Pyongyang, and it was one of the last offensives, main offensives. And yeah, he told us some stories about that. He had a good friend who he enlisted with called Lieutenant Craven, and one day Lieutenant Craven was gathering 1 or 2 people to go on a tank, assembling a tank crew to go out and have a bit of a recce in no man's land. And the hills were all numbered, and it was between, you know, a couple of these hills that were numbered. And he opened the turret on the tank to use his binoculars, and a mortar shell landed right inside and killed all 6 of them. You know, my granda was potentially could have been assembled for that tank crew, because, and he said he would have went with his mate Lieutenant Craven if it had been there on the selection, but he wasn't. He was away doing something else, so he never, you know, thankfully he never went. You know, but when they come back to clean the tank out, my granda said he remembers a watch attached to an arm, and he knew it was his mate's watch, you know, and he volunteered with a few other people to clean the tank out and, you know, assemble the dismembered bodies. You know, a lot of things he told us about that war, you know. He got 2 medals, you know, one for 28 days active service and another one for a year's active service. You know, when I often used to say, you're a war hero, Grandad, you know, he would always say the same thing, you know, your great-uncle Howard was a war hero. You know, your great-uncle Howard was lucky he come back. And I never ever forget what he said to us about him being over there. He said, I was just a 17-year-old boy trying my best not to get shot. That's what he said. Put it very bluntly, you know, 17-year-old boy trying his best not to get shot. He was a magnificent man, you know, a paragon of virtue, you know, is what he was. He threw 1 punch in his life, and that was when he decked one of my mum's ex-boyfriends after my dad died when I think I was about 4 and a half. My mum was seeing a fella that wasn't so nice at all, and my granda turned up in the 3-wheeler once and decked him. I miss him. He come out of the army, and he wanted to be in the Merchant Navy. He always wanted to be at sea, but he could never get a post, a position. So he took a job at the local mental hospital up there, the Garlands, and he assistant cook. And he was there for 35 years. You know, he worked his way up to chief kitchen superintendent. He ran the kitchens. They were feeding 1,500 people 3 times a day. And the Garlands was very much like an enclosed village. They didn't get anything in, you know, they were completely self-sufficient in there. You know, they had all their own butchers and vegetables and everything from all trades to, you know, barbers, everything, you know, everything. It was like a village. They didn't take anything in at all. And he told us so many stories about that place, you know. He met my nana there. My nana was there. My nana was from Annan. And my nana worked there too. And it was his first ever girlfriend that he ever had. First ever girlfriend that he ever had, and he married her. And he was with her for 47 years. You know, and like I say, that level of commitment now is definitely extinct, you know, it's gone. 47 years they were together before my nana died. And, you know, I miss my nana. She died, you know, 10, 12 years previous to my granddad. And my granddad was... They always agreed that it would be better... My nana suffered bad health all her life. My granddad retired when he was 55 to look after her, you know, and he did that for many years. And she died, and I remember the funeral, and I remember my granda talking many times about it, that it was his soulmate, it was his companion, and he outlived all his friends, he outlived his wife, and he felt very lonely in his later years, and we tried to give him as much company as we could, but he outlived all his friends. You know, and I remember saying that he was kind of glad in a way, because him and my nana used to agree that it would be better if she died first, because she was incapable of looking after herself, you know. she would have went in a home or something likely. I mean, or something of that nature, you know, if my granddad had went first, because he was a sole carer, you know. I miss him dearly. I think about him a lot. I've thought about him so much today, deeply, and at work. You know, I miss him. I miss him so much. Yeah, I'm going to leave that there. Thanks for listening. This has gone on for 10 minutes. I was just having a ramble, and I'm going to tribute this tonight. I'm going to tribute this, you know, to my granddad, the greatest man I ever met. You know, a paragon of virtue. And like I said, men of that generation now, and what they stood for, as in moral value, characteristics, you know, level of commitment, is long gone. You know, and it's a shame. You know, the people of yesteryear will never be reborn. You know, and we're left with this so-called society, what we've got now. But it is what it is, you know. I just thought I'd mention a few things about him. A great man. Thanks for listening, people. Bye-bye.